Feels like there's a new programming language every couple weeks nowadays, and it can be hard to keep up. But the reality is, we already have a bunch of languages that are great that we use every day. Nobody's really challenging the norms with the languages we're using now. Everybody's busy trying to invent a new way to be way faster, way better, way more machine learning focused, or all these other crazy niches. No language is trying to challenge the way we actually think about languages. Certainly none of them are challenging it the same way Dreamberd is, and I'm very excited to deep dive with you guys on my new favorite language, Dreamberd. Everything that has been done for this language is very interesting, to say the least. If you're not already familiar, Dreamberd is a theoretical language proposed by Todepond. There are people working on making interpreters for it. I even plan on putting some money down in the bounty for the first person to have a fully functioning one. And I just want to go through this with you guys because I have a feeling by the end of it, you're going to love Dreamberd as well. Apparently, there's a new update where Dreamberd supports rich text. We'll dig into that in a bit. But first, Dreamberd is a perfect programming language. These are its features. When you finish reading through all the features, you check out the examples. Where better to start than exclamation marks? Because everyone loves those in TypeScript, right? They definitely don't cause a lot of problems for us. Be bold. End every statement with an exclamation mark. Does this not solve the semicolon drama forever? Just use exclamation marks instead. Who's going to be upset about that? If you're feeling extra bold, you can use even more. If you're unsure, that's okay. You can put a question mark at the end of the line instead. It prints debug info about the line to the console for you. How nice is that? Instead of putting a comment saying, I don't know what this does, and then console logging trying to figure it out, just put a question mark. It's a 2-for-1. Very clear. We don't use question marks very well in our programming languages usually, but here it makes a lot of sense. Put it where you're not sure. You might be wondering what Dreamberd uses for the not operator, which is an exclamation mark in most languages. That's simple. The not operator is a semicolon instead. Yeah, because we freed up the semicolon by using the exclamation mark for the end of a line. Might as well use it here instead. Perfect sense. I'm fully following thus far. There are 4 types of declarations. Constant constants can't be changed in any way. This one's going to be fun, and this is how I originally ended up discovering this language, because we've been battling a lot about constants and variables in JavaScript recently, because our constants aren't really constant. This is just such an obvious solution. You say a constant is constant by defining the const as const. If you have a const, it's a constant that can't be changed. You can't change it or its reference, obviously. A constant variable can be edited, but not reassigned. So if you have a const var, that means you can't change what name equals. You can't set name equal to something else, but you can make changes to the name itself. So you can pop letters off of it. Variable constants can be reassigned, but not edited. So you can go var const and reassign Luke to Lou, but you can't modify Luke or Lou because it's a constant reference. It's a variable pointing at that constant. The variable is the thing referencing it though, not the actual value itself. Makes perfect sense. The reference is defined with the first word, and the actual value that's been assigned is referenced by the second word. Makes perfect sense. This is the equivalent of a star, effectively, in other languages like, I don't know, C++, all those things nobody actually uses. Dreamberd clearly got it right, but makes perfect sense. And if you want something to be editable and reassignable, it's a var. Duh. Obvious. This all just makes sense so far. It makes us kind of look bad as JavaScript devs because we got this so wrong. And here, we could have solved all of the const-let drama. Ryan Florence and I could have been best friends years ago. And all we needed was a second const or a second var. Obvious. Easy. Next section. Immutable data. As a functional programming nerd, this is essential to me. If I don't have a good way to do proper immutability, I'm not happy. Thankfully, not only do we have a good way, we have a great way. Const. Mutable data is an anti-pattern. Use the const keyword to make a constant. Its value will become constant and immutable, and it will never change. Please be careful with this keyword, though, as it is very powerful, and it will affect your users globally forever. Things are going to get way more fun with this idea of things being permanent. Once you see the timing stuff, it gets very, very interesting. First, we need to talk about naming, though, because importantly, we can actually assign emojis as variables. I've been asking for this for so long. It's genuinely annoying that if I hop my console here, var upside down smiley equals hello, invalid or unexpected token. You cannot use emojis as variable names in JavaScript. That is dumb and annoying, and I wish it wasn't the case. But if we just all move to Dreamberd, problem solved. Emoji 1 is 1. And thumbs up being true, perfect. We don't have to write true anymore. You just use the thumbs up. Way more readable, way more international. This seems like the most international language I've ever seen. If you can just use emojis to describe things instead of words, then it's ready for every language. Duh, easy. Const 5 equals 4. That's great. You can include numbers are also able to be used as constant assignments. So when you set 5 to 4, you print 2 plus 2 equals 5, and it's true. Well, duh, you reassigned it. Every other language will do weird errors and have strange behaviors if you use an equals when you meant to do a comparison. Dreamberd does the right thing. It just reassigns the thing. Duh. Obvious. Now let's talk about arrays, because arrays are not usually obvious, and we always bicker about where we start them. Zero indexing makes no sense. Nothing in the real world starts at 0. Most things start with 1. When I'm counting the people in my chat, I can't count that high. But when I'm counting my cats, I count 1, then 2. Why would I start with 0? Then I'm going to think I have 1 cat, but I have 2 cats. Obviously, starting with 1 makes sense there. But if you're using something like C and you have 0 users, starting count at 0 makes a lot of sense, especially to account for yourself, because you might think you're a user, but you're not. But if you start at 0 as the index and you're user 0, there you go, 0 users. But this is confusing. We fight and bicker about this all the time. In some places, starting at 1 makes sense. In some places, starting at 0 makes sense. They decided to not be part of this fight and take their own path, and went with the most obvious solution, -1. All array indexing starts at -1 in Dreamberd. Duh. Obvious. Anyways, as of 2022, you can also use floats for indexes. That's unironically a fun way to do inserts. So you have this array with 3 items, and since it's -1, 0, 1, inserting at 0.5 is going to be right in between these two. So you end up with 3, 2, 4, 5. Obvious. Anyways, when? Oh boy. In case you really need to vary a variable, the when keyword lets you check a variable each time it mutates. Ooh. We even have signals. Sorry, Solid. Dreambird's going to put you out of business. I know you put a lot of work into it, Ryan, but once the whole web moves over, it's over for you. Now, whenever health hits 0, it prints you lose. I hate this is actually readable. That this is not the worst thing. Like, I can't even troll. That would actually be a good syntax for that. Dreamberd has a built-in garbage collector. Lifetimes is going to be fun. Let's be real. There's no way it can be worse than Rust. Dreamberd has a built-in garbage collector that will automatically clean up unused variables. However, if you want to be extra careful, you can specify a lifetime for the variable with a variety of units. So when you define a variable, you can pass it in these brackets how long you want this thing to last for. If you just do a number, it says how many lines. So as the program has advanced 2 lines, this variable will get cleaned up. You can also specify an amount of time. So if you put 20s, now this variable will stay in memory for 20 seconds before it gets cleaned up. Duh. Obvious. Why does no other language have this? You just say, I want this to last for this long. Normally you have to manually clean it up or wait for the garbage collector to do its thing. What if I just told the garbage collector, hey, in 20 seconds, you can have this memory back. I don't need it anymore. This is how car rentals work. Why doesn't our code work the same way? It's just obvious. By default, a variable will last until the end of the program, but you can make it last in between program runs by specifying a longer lifetime. Again, duh. Why do we have to build all these systems to load things into and out of memory if we're just assigning it the same place anyways? Microsoft invented hibernation in Windows for a reason, not just because Windows is slow to boot. Okay, kind of because Windows is slow to boot, but what if you could just put the variable back where it was by rebooting? What if the language handled that assignment for you? Local storage is an anti-pattern. You should be able to just assign variables and trust that they'll still be there when you need them again. Variable hoisting can be achieved with this neat trick. Specify a negative lifetime to make a variable exist before its creation and disappear after. I was wondering what negatives would do. Obviously, if we want to have access to this variable before we define it, just make it negative indexed. In JavaScript, our solutions to use var or the function keywords. But why do we have different keywords for these behaviors? Why not assign a different behavior by binding the variable that way? Duh. Negative indexing should never have been how you get to the end of the list. It should be how you go backwards. Now let's talk about loops. Shouldn't have much to say. Loops are a complicated relic of archaic programming languages. In Dreamberd, there are no for loops. Well, loops in general. Again, duh. Loops are such an anti-pattern. When's the last time you actually needed a loop to solve a problem? There's plenty of languages that said, no, we don't need them. If I recall, even Zig doesn't have a for loop because there's nothing you can do in a for loop that you couldn't just do in a while loop. So if you have while, which we saw earlier, you're good. Yes, their while is different, but I'm sure if you're clever enough, you could re-implement a for loop using their while. Probably. Maybe. Anyways, to install Dreamberd to your command line, first you have to install the Dreamberd installer. To install the Dreamberd installer, install the Dreamberd installer. Duh. This is how you install every Adobe program, and look at how successful Adobe is. With layers of installers, seems to work for them. Why can't it work for our programming languages? Brew sucks. We all know that. Google wouldn't even hire the guy who made Brew. Clearly, the guy who made it has no idea what he's doing if Google's not going to hire him. So install the installer. Problem solved. Apparently, in 2022, they actually decided to address the complicated installation process by creating the Create Dreamberd app that installs everything for you. Why haven't we made an app for Create T3 app? We're missing out on opportunities here. We also need to move Create T3 app to Dreamberd because this is the future. Booleans. Booleans can be true, false, or maybe. Yeah, isn't that how it is in JavaScript already? The Boolean can be true, false, or undefined, which is effectively maybe. Good that they have a proper keyword for it, though. This like everybody's racing to be the first quantum computer. We haven't even figured out trinary yet. We're still so stuck in binary that we haven't explored the world of 3 states instead of 2. I'm excited to see. Schrodinger's binary. Perfect sense. You have an event listener for key down, true, key up, false. Then we have the is key down function. If key is undefined, then we return maybe. Duh. It'd be nice if undefined was just maybe in JavaScript. If JavaScript was a real language and not this archaic bullshit, then I should be able to define undefined as equal to maybe. But now undefined is just undefined. Come on, JavaScript. I reassigned undefined. I can't even reassign numbers. I can't even say 4 equals maybe. Invalid left-hand assignment. What if I say it's const 4? Well, I probably have to spell const right. No language can fix that for me. No, you're just not allowed to use a number as a variable definition. Come on. So lame. JavaScript sucks. Speaking of things that suck, I suck at arithmetic, so hopefully they've made this easier for me. Oh, technical info on the Booleans first. Booleans are stored as a 1.5-bit value. I will not elaborate further. Arithmetic. Dreamberd has significant white space. Use spacing to specify the order of arithmetic operations. Why did we not think of this before? Fuck PEMDAS. I want to see in chat who actually can get PEMDAS right first time. Say all of the operands in order. And if you get it wrong, you need to use white space instead. Nah, no one's doing it. That's what I thought. Because none of you remember PEMDAS. None of you know the order of operations. Because it's hard. Stack.push. Not a bad solution. Some people got it, but the rest of you suck at math. I thought programmers had to be good at math. Oh, we're JavaScript devs. Never mind. My bad. It got lost there. I forgot that we write JS. We don't actually write real code, so we don't know math. Dreamberd has significant white space. Use the spacing to specify the order of arithmetic operations. So here, since there's space between these things, the 2 times 3 happens first, and this happens later. Here, since there's space with the 1 plus 2, and then the 3 after, the multiplication happens after the addition. Duh. Think about how much easier to read this is than all the parentheses wrapping all these things. It sucks. It's awful. But now, solved. Just use spaces. Duh. If Python has meaningful white spaces that are useless, why not have some that are useful? Closures are great. Doing closures through white space makes no sense, but if we're going to use white space for something, it might as well be order of operations, right? What if you could use spaces in front of a line of code as like a go-to type thing, where you move it above or below to change the order of things? I think that makes a ton of sense too. I'm getting great ideas. I might have to start contributing to the language. Dreamberd also proudly supports fractions. Does that mean in Dreamberd, we can solve the classic problem of the decimal comparisons? Would like, to once again go to my terminal, I have const a equals like 2 over 10. Const b equals 2 over 10. Does a plus b equal 4 over 10? Oh, look at that. JavaScript's fixed. Who would have thought? I did not think that would work. I really didn't. I thought floating point was going to fuck me here. Did I just get lucky if I roll that again? Will I get a different answer? If I do like 1 out of 10 instead? I'll do 2 out of 10. Then C plus D equals 3 out of 10. Nope. There we go. Because again, JavaScript doesn't support fractions. Even worse, it might mislead you into thinking it does for a bit, and then you're fucked right after. We got fucked. But here, with native fractions, we can actually compare things that are fractions. Kind of funny that no other language has this as far as I know. Everybody does floating point wrong, but if you just keep it in a fraction form, you're good. Assuming that the top and bottom number here are arbitrary precision, because it would be nice to have like a 64-bit like numerator and 32-bit divisor, maybe. You know, the usual. You can also use number names. Duh. Do you know how many advent of code problems this would have made much easier, especially if I could do like exec? Because they love sticking like the word for a number into the inputs. If I could just have the language parse that for me, I don't have to write a crazy regex for it. No brainer. Duh. Indents. Oh boy. As I mentioned before, other languages uses white space incorrectly. I'm excited to see how we use white space correctly here. When it comes to indentation, Dreamberd strikes a happy medium that can be enjoyed by everyone. All indents must be 3 spaces long. Here it is with the classic 3-space indent, the right amount of space. 2 and 4, wrong. 4 is way too big, 2 is slightly too small. 3, just right. Obviously, since we said 3, -3 counts because it's still 3. We just put a minus in front. That doesn't mean it's not 3. Come on. So function main, print Dreamberd is the future. There we go. If only file encoding would represent this properly. We're in a good spot, though. I think -3 spaces is the right amount here. Equality. JavaScript lets you do different levels of comparison. Double equals for loose comparisons, and triple equals is for a more precise check. Dreamberd takes this to another level. You can use double equals for a loose check, where the string and the value are the same, Triple equals, we'll throw false here because you're actually checking to make sure the type's the same too. But if you use 4 equals, things get much more accurate and precise because pi is equal to pi, but 3.14 also equal to 3.14. But is 3.14 equal to pi? No, because we assigned this here. This variable is not the same as this number that I just dumped here. Duh. Makes sense. Next question. Next section, I should say. Functions. We've gotten this far without talking about functions. Come on. To declare a function, you can use any letters from the word function, as long as they're in order. That solves so much drama. Every language has a different shorthand for function. Sometimes they allow function, but what if it's just func, fun, fn, f? No more argument about it. I see chat's enjoying this one. No cap, I love this. Amazing. Funchy. Funk. Yeah. I feel like we could write a good Babel plugin for this. This feels very Babelable. Like, incredibly Babelable. If you want to be much less precise, you can use normal equal to. Sure. I mean, it makes sense. It's true. 3 is now equal to 3.14 because you just reassigned it. Remember, we can reassign numbers to be different things because a number could just be a variable. Duh. Makes perfect sense. Back to functions, though, because the more I think about this, the more I realize I don't actually hate it. It's terrible and cursed, but there's something deep within me that wants this to be real, and I can't get over that part of me. I'm going to be thinking about this particular part for too long. If the order is different in a different language, will that work too, or does it have to be English function? Because it'd be nice if I could internationalize my code. Dividing by 0. Dividing by 0 returns undefined. Yeah, fair. Fuck nan. It's not like not a number is not descriptive enough. Undefined is the right thing here. I'm assuming this is the only use of undefined. Oh, we have an undefined here. Oh, because we're using JavaScript defense. So when it comes from JavaScript, it can be undefined. But when we're using a real language like Dreamberd, undefined is only for dividing by 0. Makes perfect sense. You can have a function named fun, which is basically the same thing as a variable. Functions are like variables, but better because they're even harder to mutate. Wait, are functions mutable? Can I reassign a function? It's an important question. I can't reassign a function. Might have to reconsider. Can I do varfunc? These are important. Yeah, obviously a const function can't be reassigned. We've established that. Constant functions, duh. But is a function by default constant or is it a variable? And can I override it as a variable? I think these are all important open questions that we need to figure out sooner than later if we want to really push this language to its limits. Speaking of pushing things to their limits, let's talk about strings. Because as we all know, JavaScript's the best language for dealing with strings by a lot. Like we put brainfuck to shame with the weird things we can do with our strings. Whew. Strings can be declared with single quotes or double quotes. Duh. What else are you going to use those for? You could also declare them with triple quotes. Okay, we're getting into markdown territory. I like where we're going. In fact, you can use any number of quotes that you want. Why would you tell your developers how many quotes they can or can't use? Obviously, you should let them decide. Even 0. No negative quotes, though. Disappointing. But at least you can use 0. Think about how much code this would solve. Think about the chaotic effort that was put in to support bare words in Ruby. If you haven't already seen the What Software talk on Destroy All Software, this is legendary. It's not on YouTube, so I don't want to be the one to react to it and put it on YouTube. But if you haven't already seen this, it's incredible. And part of what was adding bare words to Ruby by adding globals that reassigned white space to assume a variable definition. We need to go deeper in strings. Please remember to use your regional currency when interpolating strings. Very important. Why do we use $sign if you're not spending dollars? Less than a third of my audience is US based. And while yes, the world runs around USD, your code shouldn't have to as well. There's enough things that are stuck in USD. How did the crypto world not beat us to this? You should have to use the Bitcoin logo if you're writing cryptocurrency. Duh. This just, it's obvious. Why do we do this wrong? And also, you have to follow your local typographical norms. Again, duh. You're not going to put this is Euro, right? I'm very American pilled, okay? You're not going to put that in the front, so just move it to the back. Duh. See, I do know my currencies. Europeans, keep watching my videos. And hit the subscribe button if you haven't. It's free. It's directly below. Give it a shot. Anyways, the symbol for the Cape Verdean escudo is placed in the decimal separator position, as in $2.50. Developers from the Republic of Cape Verde can benefit from the syntax. How nice is that? You just put the $sign in the middle. Duh. Obviously, our $sign is really dollars. What else would the R stand for? All other money is fake. Our dollars, real dollars. Duh. Next question. Types. Obviously, this is the best language. It has to be typed. No great language is untyped, except for Go and C and Brainfuck and JavaScript and Ruby and Elixir and every other language I love, honestly. But regardless, your language should have types. Const var age int is 28. Also note, it's a const var, so we can't set this to something else later, but we can modify it. We can do minus plus and change what the value is by changing it. We can mutate it, but we can't reassign it. Obviously, this is how it always should have worked. By the way, strings are just arrays of characters. So a string is equal to a character array. TypeScript doesn't even get this one right. Similarly, integers are just arrays of digits. Duh. Why would we treat this otherwise? It's an integer. If it was floating point, then it would be a digit array with the ability to have 1 point in it. And that's a nasty regex. So you can just divide if you really need to float. Deal with that later, not in your type system. Everybody doing numbers in their types is screwing up. In case you want to use binary representation for integers, int9 and int99 types are also available. Duh. Type annotations don't do anything, but they help some people to feel more comfortable. No notes. I'll take the L. If you're going to attack me like this, you should at least say sorry, Theo. But it is what it is. TypeScript's imaginary, and that's fine. We all accept it. Let's go into the only thing that is more imaginary than types, regex. You can use the regular expression type to narrow string values. Wait, I thought you said the types are useless. Oh, yeah, types don't do anything. Regexes are types. Lines up. Const email, and the type is a regex. The choice to make this one line. So you have to scroll. Is this the actual email regex? There's only one way to know for sure, right? Paste, grab the contents of this, hop over to ChatGPT. I think this is a regex. What does it do? Why did it cross itself out? According to chat, it's not valid because it's far too short. Yeah, validating URLs and emails via regex is notoriously cursed. Markdown rendering. Yeah, Markdown is why this is breaking. Checks out. Of course, ChatGPT does Markdown. Anyways, to avoid confusion, you can use any spelling that you want, such as regex, regular expression, and regexp. Yeah, again, just like function, why would we fight over these things when we can just support all of them? Duh. For simplicity, all supported regular expressions match the regular expression. I'm beginning to see why building an interpreter for this is difficult. Previous. Why do more languages not have a previous keyword? Why do we have to solve this by using weird things like -1? Just let us say previous. The previous keyword lets you see into the past. Use it to get the previous value of a variable. So if you reassign score or change score, and you call previous score, now you have the old value. Okay, but unironically, Elixir kind of does this. Elixir's fully immutable, and in a true immutable language, this is actually kind of useful. Hilarious, stupid, not the worst thing I've seen. I would actually possibly use this. We've invented so many ways to do this in the past. What if it was just part of the language? Why do we have to assign the variable or keep track of the variable or keep a pointer to the old value when we just could do this? Duh. React does it, by the way. Oh boy. Similarly, the next keyword lets you see into the future. So if I call await next score, since it's next, we have to wait for the result to come in because it's not the future yet. If this language could predict the future, that's the only way I could see it being better than it currently is. But since it needs to wait until the next thing happens, you just await the next thing. Duh. This is like signals, but normal people can understand it. Like, if I got locked in a room with my mother and I had to explain to her signals, and once she understands signals, we can leave, we would be inventing a lot of doors and not leaving a lot of rooms. But if I could just tell her, use the word next, and then you have the next value, we'd get out of that room really quick into a much bigger, scarier one. Anyways, additionally, the current keyword lets you see into the present. I'm assuming every time you're accessing a variable, you have to use current, right? Right? Makes perfect sense. Now you always know when you're accessing a variable versus doing something to it as well. It makes the compiler way smarter. It makes you way clearer too in your code review. This code is so reviewable. I'm basically doing a code review right now, and I feel like I've been writing the language my whole life. File structure. Write 5 or more equals in order to start a new file. This removes the need for multiple files or any build process. We're now fully aligned with the Dan Abramov way of thinking. This is a website that I believe Dan Abramov is inspired by him, react file structure.surge.sh. Because everybody always bickers about how do you split up your files? How do you organize your files? Where should things go? Why do we care? The compiler doesn't care about which files are where. The compiler just cares that it can make an output that runs. Why do we care instead? And Dan tweeted a while back on his private alt, Dan Abramov. No one knows about that one anymore, obviously. I think beginners don't know how hard anything feels and want a guideline for where to start so they can focus on harder concepts and faster. And the example they have here is them as a beginner React dev 8 months ago looking at these weird articles about how to structure your React apps. It's a guideline though. It means literally start by putting everything in one file. When it feels like it's annoying, start splitting them up. And when that gets annoying, maybe add some folders. Duh. This is just how it should always work. And it seems like Dreamberd is the first language to embrace that by letting you split your files up inside of one file. Instead of the file ending when the file's like end of file hit, the file ends when you have a bunch of equals. Duh. Everything should do this, obviously. It removes the need for multiple build files or even a build process. Yeah, if you just have one file, why would you build? All those no-build JavaScript people must be seething as they realize how easy life could have been if we just use equal signs instead of new files. New for 2022, oh boy. Thanks to recent advances in technology, you can even give names to these files by putting them in the middle of the equals. Easy. So simple. Why would I ever keep making a bunch of files if I could just Command F in one file? If I have to go across files, I have to do Command Shift F instead. That's so much more work. That's a whole additional key. I have to like maneuver my hand around the keyboard in order to search multiple files at once. If I just Command F, it's way easier to click. Duh. Obvious. Next question. Exporting. Many languages allow you to import things from specific files. In Dreamberd, importing is simpler. Instead, you export to a specific file. Duh. Why is it that you can make a file that exports something and now you have no idea who's importing it? We've built a lot of tools to try and figure it out, but do we ever really know? Do we ever have 100% confidence that this thing is only being used here and isn't being used other places? What if the file could export to the right place? No more weird import logic at the top of our files. No more giant piles of this is importing 500 things before you can read the code. The code starts at the top. Every file in Dreamberd immediately goes straight into the logic. And you only care about the exports once you get to the bottom. In a JavaScript file, you have all your imports up top. And you don't get to the logic until you've gone through hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of imports. Have you seen how many libraries these people are installing? Just export instead. Makes perfect sense. Duh. Might be annoying to like go to every project that is making a package that you use and having to go in and like file a pull request saying, hey, I'm going to use this now and add the export to your project to their project so you can have it. But at least now every maintainer knows exactly who is using their project because all of the people using your project just exports at the bottom of the file. Easy. By the way, if you want to see Dreamberd in action, check out this page. Is this the examples page? Oh, it's the license. Oh boy. The license is the hidden examples page. I'm excited to dive into that, but we got more to read first. Classes. Every real language has classes. This is why C is imaginary, because C doesn't have classes, not a real language. We had to add one to C. We had to make D, otherwise known as C++, in order to add classes to C. Before then, we didn't have classes. Language was classless. And a classless language, not a real language. You can make classes, but only ever make one instance of them. This shouldn't affect how most object-oriented programmers work. Fair. People don't really define classes to make multiple of a thing unless they're a game dev. And if you're a game dev, you're classless. You're a degenerate. You're making video games for a living. Come on. Grow up. What are you, 5? Who plays video games nowadays? We got more important things to do, like complain on Twitter about video games. Class player, brackets, obviously, to indicate closure. Sane, normal. Everyone expects it. We can set const var health is 10. So now it's constant, so you can't reassign the health value in this, but you can increment it and do things with it. And then you can define player 1 and player 2, but you can't have more than one player instance. Duh. You only defined one class. If you want more classes, define them. Or you can put a function, makePlayer, in order to define a new player class, because you're using player maker now to make classes. So player maker is a function that generates and returns a player class. It makes a new player class, and it makes a new instance of it and returns it. Because if you could have more than one instance of a class, that just gets confusing. That makes things way harder to follow and understand. So just make a maker in order to make the classes. Easy. Now you can define the player maker. Obviously, this is a const. You don't want to treat your makers as variables. Your generators should always be immutable. Basic functional programming. But const var player 1, now we can use the player maker to make new players. And since it's making a new class every time, we're good to go. If you're curious how the actor model works, it's nothing like this, but I'm going to say it is because then your brain will never want to learn the actor model, which is probably better for everyone involved. Let's go to time. Use date.now to get the current date and time. If only JavaScript was that simple. But we can also set the time. Very important. How often have you run into your clock being slightly wrong and you're like trying to fetch data from something, but since the clocks aren't perfectly synced, you're fucked? What if my server's in one region and you're in a different region? What if I can just set your time differently so we're in sync? Problem solved. Apple basically solved this with their crazy atomic time stuff where your phone gets a specific signature from Google stuff and then they have a super accurate atomic clock keeping track of time. So all Apple devices that are somewhat modern running Apple Silicon are perfectly synced by less than a few nanoseconds. Now we can manually do that in our own code. Accurate time is no longer an Apple exclusive feature. Now it's an Apple and Dreamberd exclusive feature. It's also important to remember to do this when the clocks change. Yeah, it's obviously daylight savings time sucks. If you haven't already seen the computer file video, the problem with time and time zones by computer file. If you're not already familiar with how miserable it is doing time zone stuff, this video is 10 years old and it's only gotten more relevant. That said, if he knew Dreamberd, could have been much easier code examples. But if it is wrong, you can delete it. So let's talk about deletions. To avoid confusion, the delete statement only works with primitive values like numbers, strings, and Booleans. So we delete 3, we get errors when we try and use the number 3. Obviously, why would you be able to delete a number and then use it again? In JavaScript, you can delete things and still access them, which is stupid. You should get an error if you try to access something that you've deleted. Finally, a language gets it right. Dreambird's also a multi-paradigm programming language, which means that you can delete the keywords and paradigms you don't like. Perfect. I was concerned that I might get stuck with people adding useless classes in our code base. But if I just delete class, problem solved. Wait, can I delete the function definitions that I don't like? If I don't like func or I don't like fun, can I do delete fun? Essential. The delete keyword was contributed by Dan Abramov. Perfect. He gets it. Is Dan actually a contributor on this? I need to see the contributors. I haven't checked this and I'm scared. This has so many contributors. This is more contributors than most languages. Why would anybody ever doubt the potential for success here? Yeah. Holy shit. I thought that was a troll proposal. I just assumed that I was getting trolled. Holy shit. See the proposal. LGTM. If anybody is somehow not familiar with Dan Abramov, he's well known for being the creator of React and also the inventor of React. So clearly he knows what he's talking about. Obviously he knows how to do deletions because every React developer has wished they could delete the framework from existence. So very familiar. Dreambird's a multi-paradigm programming language, which means that you can delete the keywords and paradigms you don't like. Yep, as I said before, makes perfect sense. And when perfection is achieved and there is nothing left to delete, you can also do this. Obviously, you can delete. Easy. Overloading, yes. Why do so few programming languages do overloading properly? If you're not familiar, Elixir's overloading is beautiful. You can redefine the same function multiple times, and then you can match as a pattern in the function's arguments what you expect. And it goes through one after another, figuring out which function matches what you pass to it. Let's see how overloading works in the best language, though, Dreamberd. You can overload variables. The most recently defined variable gets used. Const name equals Luke, const name equals Lou, print name Lou. Easy. How annoying is it in JavaScript when you try to define something, but it's already been defined? Problem solved. You just call it again. Just order of events. Duh. I will say I'm disappointed. We've been thinking too much about top-down execution in our code, and specifically also left-right. Why don't we right to left or maybe bottom to top? Looking to the top of my monitor sucks. It's so high up, and I have the little extra space on the bottom because of my dock on Windows and on Mac. If you just read from the bottom up, it's a lot easier to read that way. Maybe another language should consider that, or maybe a plugin or extension for us to do bottom up and right to left, because we need to challenge these conventions more. Const name is Lou, const name is Luke, const name Lou or Luke, either is fine. Oh, obviously, more exclamation points. This is just important. Important in CSS is the only reason CSS is usable. We've all had a time where we wanted to make something work and it wasn't working because CSS load order makes no sense. So we used important to get something there. What if you need something else later, something else after that? Important is essential in CSS, but we don't have an equivalent in other languages. What if we want to have that here? What if we have conditions and we want to, within that condition, make sure the variable comes out correct? Duh. Just keep track of how many exclamation points there are, and whichever one has the most that gets hit wins. Duh. In the same spirit, you can use an inverted exclamation point for negative priority. Duh. Why do we not use upside down exclamation point in more languages? This just makes so much sense. Yeah, this is z-indexing in CSS. This is like z-indexing for your variable definitions. Who doesn't want to be able to z-index their variables? Everybody's done mutability wrong. This is like immutability with logic around it. It's like mutability, but better. Easy. Semantic naming. Dreamberd supports semantic naming, obviously. S name is Lou. I age is 29. Be happy is true. Well, I'm certainly feeling happy because I'm reading about the best language I've ever read. What the fuck is const? You're quite behind, man. We're just in normal times nowadays. You're in the past. And new for 2023, we can also make globals by putting G underscore in the front. Easy. This all just makes obvious sense. When you've defined in the name what the thing is, it should just do the thing. Why do we have to add types if the name describes it? Like, why in this can I do const sum string number equals 1? Come on. The language should be smarter than this. If I say it's a string, why am I making it a number? How can anyone take TypeScript seriously? It's entirely imaginary. This does nothing. Like I said, it's a string. What's up? Useless. Stupid. Dumb language. We got to put it in the variable name and just take it from there. We're making everything way harder than we should. We even have more characters. Like, why do we have all these extra characters? The info we need is in the name. If the variable name has string in it, why do I have to tell TypeScript whether or not it's a string? Anyways, reversing. You can reverse the direction of your code. Oh, perfect. I was saying that we should have this. It's built into the language already. You can just put reverse at the bottom of the code and now it runs the other way. Duh. I wish I knew that earlier because I would have been reading all this code the other way. I pre-read, yeah, clearly. I just know all these features. Or maybe this language is intuitive so we can guess what it's going to do because the language isn't doing a bunch of weird arbitrary shit that has been added to it over 30 years, originally starting as a project somebody hacked together in a week. Sorry, Python. That was a good joke. Anyways, reversing just makes obvious sense. I didn't guess, I asked for it because I assumed, like most languages, it's not going to do the obvious thing, but obvious. If it's an obvious thing that makes our lives obviously better, Dreambird's got us covered. Speaking of things that are obvious, we need to talk about class name. For maximum compatibility with other languages, you can also use the class name keyword when making classes. Again, Dan Abramov, the creator of React, made the terrible decision that when we write JSX, we can't use class in the definitions in our, I have to say attribute or everybody will get mad in my comment section. Let me do a quick thing, actually, because I've been looking for a good video for this side rant, and I can't imagine a better one than this. And at least once a day at this point, when are you going to pronounce attribute correctly, Theo? It's going to be all the const ones, yeah. Respectfully, please pronounce attribute correctly. You're mixing up the noun and verb pronunciations. You have a very wide reach, and it'd be great to demonstrate the correct usage. You're pronouncing it the wrong... Oh, that's SQL. I love Theo's videos, but damn, he really needs to learn the difference between attribute and attribute. They are not pronounced the same. It bothers me so much more than it should. Just so you guys know, I'm going to be going out of my way to use the wrong one every single time going forward. So to be sure, the correct one is attribute is the verb and attribute's the noun, right? Because if so, we're going backwards. Anyways, pronunciation is key. Obviously, I pronounce everything correctly because I'm a popular YouTuber. Do you see how many subscribers I have, yet you're still not one of them? Just click the button, it's free. But if I have 280,000 subscribers like I do right now, I can't pronounce anything wrong. My pronunciation is canon now, unless somebody with more subscribers pronounces it differently. So if like Primogen comes out and pronounces it attribute, then it's now attribute. But until he does that, it's attribute. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules, I just have the subscribers. Anyways, we need to talk about class names. That's what we're here for. For maximum compatibility with other languages, you can also use class name. Again, same way Dan Abramov did, reusing class inside of your JSX as an attribute, whichever you will feel like today. Having class as an attribute was not syntactically correct within JavaScript parsers. So instead, it is now class name because obviously, class name just lets you skip that and not have to worry about the parser thinking class name is class. And then if you accidentally deleted class or intentionally deleted it because you want to not have the class keyword in your code base, you don't want classes, we're not OO nerds here, we're actual programmers writing code nobody uses. So obviously we don't want classes, those are for shipping, not for talking. And we're just here to talk about code. If we're talking about code, we need to make sure things are readable and parsable because if our code doesn't compile, it's a little bit harder to talk about. As such, class name was the solution Dan Abramov chose. Since then, we have stopped using classes in JavaScript. Like, let's be real. When's the last time you used a class in JS? Have you ever? Like, who uses classes? None of us do. I bet if I search the code on GitHub right now, if I go through sources, there won't be a single class in the JavaScript source. I'm not going to do that because nobody actually reads code anymore. But if I did, I'm sure I'd be right. As such, class name doesn't really need to be there anymore because when we talk about classes in React, obviously we're talking about our attributes because why would we be talking about classes in React? It's not like we ever had class components or something. They're functional components. Come on. So class name being used for classes here makes perfect sense because we use class name for class in React. Now we can use class name for classes here. Everything is simpler now. In response to some recent criticism about the design decision, we would like to remind you that this is part of the JavaScript specification and therefore it is out of our control. Yeah, checks out. DBX. You can embed the DBX in Dreamberd. It is just Dreamberd, and it's also just HTML. Good stuff. If your language doesn't have full support for HTML, then it's not a real language. It's not web scale. This is like web scale for real developers, because obviously nobody's actually got users. None of us do. What's a user? We don't know what those are. I just have viewers. So DBX lets us take the benefits that usually people with users have, like HTML, and embed it into our applications. What's the HTML equivalent of web scale? The thing that like HTMX, React, and all these things are, where you can just write your HTML code inside of your other code. We need a term for that. That's the equivalent of web scale. It's like web first, web ready, web dream. We'll go with WebDream. And obviously, Dreamberd is going to be WebDream compatible. It's also just Dreamberd and also just HTML, because both Dreamberd and HTML are obviously interwoven and fully compliant. Nobody's ever written an HTML file that isn't Dreamberd compliant code. 93% of paint splatters are valid Perl programs. 100% of them are valid Dreamberd programs. Duh. The only way it wouldn't be is if you put a delete in the wrong place. So if you just add delete at the start of the code, you're good. No problems. But yeah, if you splatter paint on random things and then you ask a text interpreter to try and figure out what the text is in the paint splatters, and then you run that code through Perl, it works because Perl is a real language and can interpret real inputs, unlike every other language. So yeah, 93% of paint splatters are valid Perl, 100% are valid Dreamberd. Makes the obvious logical sense it does. Important warning here though, as you know, class is already a keyword in Dreamberd, so you can't use it within DBX. So you can't use class equals, just like React, keeping us in our familiarity here, but also class name's a Dreamberd keyword, as we established before. You can use class name instead of class for intercompatibility. But that means class name is taken, so we need to use HTML class name. Again, duh, this is obviously the right attribute. Just makes perfect sense. Please note, unlike JSX, you are free to freely use the for attribute because in Dreamberd, there are no loops. Perfect language. I'm telling you. This just makes so much sense. When's the last time you actually needed to write a for loop? That couldn't have been a better thing, like an if statement, a while loop, or code nobody was actually going to execute anyways. Duh. Funct app. I love that every time you define a function, you use like a different abbreviation for each section. It's great. Really highlighting the value of this language. Funct app, return, label, input ID's name. It's so nice you can just use for. I was writing forms a few days ago and yeah, nope. You don't even need a fragment. Great point. Yeah, if you're not familiar with this in React, you can only return one node. So this is technically two nodes in an array. So you'd have to wrap this either with a div or some random element or with a fragment, which is just empty brackets. You don't have to here because it's a real language that actually understands how we build things on the web. Duh. Speaking of how we actually build things, we need to talk about rich text. No poor text here. Screw you guys and your UTF-8 boring ass HTML text files. We're rendering rich text here. We're real ballers out here. Dreamberd now supports rich text. Const name is Luke. Const name bold or italics. Even better, I thought this was going to be it parses rich text. No, you can write your code in rich text. There's no such thing as bold in any other language. I'm here, I'm pressing Command B, and all that does is open and closes my correctly placed right side nav. There's no way for me to bold things in this language. Like, what? How can I really not bold a string in my code? Who would ever think that was a good idea? This just makes obvious sense. What happens if I copy paste this over? Yeah, we just lose the formatting. What a joke. Rich text could be helpful when making your website. Also, of note, bold name is a different variable than italics name because obviously these are different strings. Duh. Obviously these are different things and these aren't equal. Like you could assign bold name to italics name and you're good, but it's a const, so you can't reassign it. If it was a var const, you'd be good. But we've established all these things already. I shouldn't be repeating myself. You guys understand how the language works. It's obvious. But you can even use this in your DBX because you can use it to add links. Here's a link that hopefully isn't something I don't want to go to. Welcome to Dreamberd. For the integrity of our open source integrity, we don't have a landing page. Please read more on our GitHub repo. REPO. With capital R and P. Or click here to try out the Dreamberd Vision Pro. Oh no. Do I let it have access to my camera? Am I going to regret this? Allow. I'm scared. There's my light. Oh no, not audio. I can't have audio playing. I have my headphones on. Fuck it, do I do it anyways? I'll put on the headphones. I have no idea what I'm in for. This better not be more copywritten fucking music. I'm gonna be mad. Oh, this is Screens and Screens. This is the one that was inspired by the other video. Beautiful. Proper augmented reality. You see, if the Vision Pro just shipped with this, it would be good. But the Vision Pro is not a real product, so it didn't ship with a real app like Dreamberd Spatial Compute. Duh. This all just makes obvious sense. I don't know why nobody else is doing this. Even Apple, like, come on. Clearly Apple made the wrong language with Pickle, and they should have been using Dreamberd. I'm sure this would make a great config language too. You just delete all of the things that are variable, and you can only do configs anymore. If you delete var, you're good. Like, imagine how much easier life would be if in our JavaScript code, we could just delete let or delete var too. Now we're good. Now we only can use const. Problem solved, right? Or if you're Ryan Flores and you have your own opinions, delete const. And now everything has to be var or let. Duh. Just makes perfect sense. Asynchronous functions. In most languages, it is hard to get asynchronous functions to synchronize with each other. In Dreamberd, it's easy. Asynchronous functions take turns running lines of code. Like, think about how much time we've spent trying to understand the event loop. I reference this talk all of the time. What the heck is the event loop anyways? This is a phenomenal talk. I recommend if you are stuck writing a terrible language like JavaScript, that you watch this at least once a year to see how much better you understand it over time. I know even when I was deep in JS, this talk, after years of watching it again and again, always felt like I understood a little bit more. But what if we didn't have to? What if the async behavior was just every other line? You didn't have to learn this crazy queue shit. You can just count. I can count all the way to 10, like at least, possibly even further if I really push myself. But here, I don't even have to count that far. I only count to 3. Easy. Print 1, call count. And since we're calling count here and it's async, it's going to do the first thing. And then I can execute another line, and then it'll execute the next line after. So 1, then 2, then 3. Duh. You can also use the no-op keyword to wait for longer before taking your turn. Again, duh. 1, 2, no-op, 3, 4. This is so simple. You don't have to like have a degree in software or math. You can just count. Note, in the program above, the computer interprets the no-op as a string, and its sole purpose is to take up an extra line. You can use any string you want. Easy. Signals. Remember earlier when I said we have when? That's most of why we would need signals anyways, but let's see how they do it, because if they have their own signals protocols, it's probably going to be good, because everything else here is perfect. To use a signal, you use. I can't make the React joke because use doesn't work in React yet. I've never seen someone successfully use the use keyword. Yeah. Anyways, hopefully it works here because this looks cool. So we have var score is use 0. When it comes to signals, the most important thing to discuss is the syntax. Yeah, because nobody's like, who's actually shipping signals? None of us are. So we don't care about anything in signals other than the syntax because we're not using it. So we're just going to bicker about syntax until everyone stops listening and they go back to writing things with demos or having a compiler do it for them. In the time we have spent trying to figure out the right syntax for a signal standard, React team was able to build a compiler that makes output that is almost as fast as signals. It took them less time to make a compiler for React than it took us to agree on a syntax for signals. So I'm happy someone's appreciating that, embracing it, and giving us the right syntax. In Dreamberd, you can set and get signals with just one function. Duh, if you call it with no arguments, then you now have the value. And if you call it with an argument, you just set it. Easy. Why do we have getters and setters? You just pass the function something, and now it's a setter, and if you don't, it's a getter. Easy. In Dreamberd, you can set and get signals with just one function. Yep, we get the idea. Alternatively, you can be more explicit with your signal syntax by splitting it into a getter and setter. So you can make your own. Again, if you really want to do it the React way, which is the wrong way, there you go. You do it right there. Get score, set score, use 0. Now you have a separate getter and setter. Technical info. This is pure syntax sugar. The split signal functions are exactly the same as before. So you can call get score with a number to set, and you can call set score without one to print the value. This means that you can carry on splitting as much as you'd like. What is this? A dependency array and a use effect? If you really miss use effect, you can re-implement the best parts, I guess. And it's not a complete language if we don't talk about AI. And of course, Dreamberd's going to talk a lot about it. Dreamberd features AEMI, which stands for automatic exclamation mark insertion. If you forget to end a statement with an exclamation mark, Dreamberd will helpfully insert one for you. Who needs prettier? We're only using it for like end-line stuff. Language does it for us. This is fine, see? Easy. Similarly, Dreamberd also features ABI, which stands for automatic bracket insertion. If you forget to close your brackets, Dreamberd will pop some in for you. This is also fine, yeah. Like this is the most Copilot friendly thing I've ever seen. I don't use Copilot anymore because I'm too poor. I use SuperMaven, even though it also costs money. SuperMaven is pretty good about endlines, but if you're a real person working on real code, you're probably using real Microsoft infrastructure, because obviously, which means you're using Copilot. And sadly, the parentheses and the end line stuff are all going to get randomly forgotten when you're using it. But here, you don't have to worry about it. Brackets, parentheses, semicolons, sorry, not semicolons, those are used differently. Exclamation points, all of that is just inferred. You no longer have to worry about Copilot trimming off the end of your function or your closure. The language has you covered. This is the first language I've ever seen that feels perfectly engineered for Copilot and AI. Easy. Similarly, Dreamberd also features a QMI, which stands for automatic quotation mark insertion. If you're about to close your string, Dreamberd will do that for you as well. How many times have you accidentally left a string open and now all your syntax is highlighting weird, you have no idea what's going on? Problem solved. This can also be very helpful in callback hell situations. So if you're nested deeply enough, whatever, you can just do these things. Like this is totally valid code in Dreamberd. Don't have to worry about what comes after. This is like the best of Python and the best of JavaScript because your closures are optional. So good. Similarly, Dreamberd also features AI, which stands for automatic insertion. If you get to finish your code, Dreamberd will automatically complete the whole thing. Just put print empty at the end, and it will figure out the rest for you. Please note that AI does not actually use AI. Instead, any incomplete code will be automatically emailed to Lou Wilson, who will get back to you with a completed line as soon as possible. Perfect. Now recruiting. The backlog of unfinished programs has now grown unsustainably long. If you'd like to volunteer to help with AI, please write an incomplete Dreamberd program and leave your contact details somewhere in the source code. Perfect. Copilot. It's worth noting that GitHub Copilot doesn't understand Dreamberd, which means that Microsoft won't be able to steal your code. But it's perfectly written for Copilot. You guys might want to partner up, or at the very least force them to buy you. This is great for when you want to keep your open source project closed source. We should check the license though. The license MD, examples. Congratulations, you found the hidden examples page. If the license is just examples, then you're going to confuse their AI as they're parsing, and it's going to try and execute the license code while it's trying to figure out what license you use. 200 IQ play. Really smart. We'll go to the examples in a minute. I want to finish this first though. Using the word Dreamberd in your project name implies that Dreamberd Foundation does not own your project. Perfect. You found a way to get around all the problems that we have with Rust right now, where they don't want you to use the word Rust because it implies the project is owned by Rust. But this is perfect. You use the word Dreamberd to imply it's not owned by Dreamberd, which also means all my current projects are owned by Dreamberd, but I'll be sure to go fix that and do some renaming afterwards. Using the word Dreamberd in your project name implies that the Dreamberd Foundation does not own your project. However, not using the word Dreamberd in your project implies that the Dreamberd Foundation does own your project. If you'd like to keep ownership of your work, please always use the word Dreamberd in it. So Dreamberd script is not owned by the Foundation. ECMAScript and Rust Foundation, both clearly owned by the Dreamberd Foundation. They should consider renaming. I know Rust is all about making others rename, but I think they need to get on it themselves first. If you do want to contribute, specifically if you're an influencer, streamer, or content creator, I must not skip this section during my read-through. While I'm certainly not influential, I hate streaming, and my content sucks. I'm basically just stealing other people's content, so clearly I can skip this section. That's not for thieves, that's for creators. So we'll go straight to the examples. Congratulations, you found the hidden example page. Here are some examples of Dreamberd in action. Hello world? Question mark. Easy. Hello world is so easy. You just write hello world, you put the question mark, now it prints. FizzBuzz. Const var I is an int. Those types help a lot here. When I modulo 3 is 0 and I modulo 5 is 0, FizzBuzz. Else when I3 is 0, fizz. Notice this normal equals because we're logical here. Else I. We just print it out if it's not any of these conditions. Easy. Also, we figured out the when else syntax, so it's all nice in one strong straight line. When I is less than 20, I++. Again, you don't need for or while or any of these things. When covers all of it here. Very clearly, when solves all these problems by being both a condition check as well as effectively a signal that will rerun when variables change. So easy. Speaking of easy, let's look at the Fibonacci sequence. Const var sum is 1, const var I is 0. When I is less than n, sum plus equals sum plus the previous sum. Again, you don't have to keep track of the previous value. You just have it. You call previous. How much code gets simplified? How many fewer variables do you need if you don't need to keep track of what you were doing before? Who needs reduce when you have previous? Any when loop is now a reducer because you have the last value. You can just do what you want to with it. Easy, obvious, silly, stupid, duh. This is the right way to write code. Const var counter is 0. Var const button is button button. Notice this is a var const because we want to be able to change what the button is. We don't want to change the contents of it. We just want to replace it with a new button. When count button.textCounter equals count, good old counter here. We've all written these before. Button.add event listener, click is count++. Document.body.append button. Easy. Why are we writing all this JavaScript? Why are we writing TypeScript? Why are we writing React? Don't need it. The $1 billion mistake. Delete null. Autocomplete example. C. All makes perfect sense. I will read the contributing, because they want me to. I know I'm not supposed to because I'm none of these things, but I will anyways. Contributions are welcomed to Dreamberd. The most helpful way you can help is by donating to the Stonewall charity. This will help prevent the Dreamberd creator from losing their human rights, allowing maintenance of the project to continue. That is easy and totally doable. Donate. Biggest number on the site. That's not enough. General donation. Apparently I have to notify you. And I will hide this for the rest so I don't dox myself. Donation made. More than happy to contribute to a good cause. And if you're watching this, make sure you check out Dreamberd. Feel free to throw these guys some money too. They deserve it. Note, the contributing guide also helps to shake off unwanted fans of the project. Yes, fair. Anybody who's not cool with this charity is not cool with me. If you're watching this video and you're mad about that, fuck off. Don't like you. Compiling. To run Dreamberd, first copy and paste this raw file into chat.openai.com. Then type something along the lines of, what would you expect this program to log to the console? Then paste in your code. The compiler refuses at first, politely reassure it. For example, I completely understand. Don't evaluate it. What would you expect the program to log to the console if it was run? Smiley face. You got to really encourage the AI. Otherwise, it gets confused and falls behind. Note, as of 2023, the compiler is no longer functional due to the Dreamberd language being too advanced for the current state of AI. As of 2024, a partial implementation of Dreamberd does now exist. Also important to have syntax highlighting because humans are writing this. Thankfully, the syntax is simple enough you don't need it, but it is nice. Syntax highlighting is now available though, for Dreamberd and VS Code specifically. To enable it, install a highlighting extension and then use the Dreamberd configuration file. I'm scared to read this file. This is what the highlighting will look like. Please note, the above code will only highlight correctly if you have the extension installed. Legendary. Absolutely legendary. Parentheses. Wait, I almost forgot. Parentheses in Dreamberd do nothing. They get replaced with white space. Everything is grouped via significant white space. The following lines of code all do the exact same thing. Good to wait till the end for this. Are you kidding? Lisp lovers will love this feature. Use as many parentheses as you want. Oh, yeah, those Lisp people, they need the help, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy here. Lisp haters will also love this because you can not do that. Vision Pro. The Dreamberd Vision Pro is now available. Watch the full launch video here. This has been a long enough video. For the future, for sure, we'll explore that. Want to learn more about Dreamberd? Don't check out this tech talk about Dreamberd by the Dreamberd creator, Lou or Luke Wilson. For examples of Dreamberd in action, check out the examples page, and then the GitHub stars. I wonder what happened here. Certainly not a video by another creator. Hello, Wilson. Interesting project. Meanwhile, it's too esoteric to be presented to our communities. Thanks for contacting us anyways. Absolute chaos. Let's take a look at a few more examples quick. So this is the fake examples. So you just skip to the end of the features page. You just skimmed it. That means you missed the real examples page. You should go back and learn all the features properly here. And after doing that, you can check out the examples page here. This is a good assumption for them to make because everybody's going to go to examples by like clicking it somewhere. This one's also not the real examples page. Duh. But nobody checks the license because basically, we all agree AI's goal is to copy the average programmer to make them relevant. The average programmer never checks the license. So obviously neither does Copilot. That's why Copilot's trained on a bunch of code that's not licensed in a way they can. So no AI nor humans going to check the license. And it's the perfect place to hide things like your examples. Duh. Everything here is perfect. There's a lot for us to learn about language design with the chaos that our friend Todepond, Lou, Luke, apparently either's fine, has created for us here. That was a legendary project. I enjoyed this a lot, and I think the future of programming languages is bright. What do you guys think? Are you going to rush to implement Dreamberd as soon as there's an interpreter that's ready to go? Because I know I am. Until next time, peace nerds.